Thank you. All right, we are ready for the second presenter of the evening. We have here Rene Derks. He is currently a lecturer at IGAP in the design and producer direction. He has quite some game development experience under his belt, previously active at Vanguard, and probably also other jobs that you might talk these folks up about.
No, actually, there's nothing on.
Find him on LinkedIn. All right, give a round of applause for Rene, please.
So they asked me to come in front of a microphone in front of a group of people and talk about game design. So I said, like, it sounds like work. No, actually, I really don't want to pretend that I know more than most of you guys. Learning game design is something you do and just takes a lot of time and effort. And in the 15 years I've been pursuing this, I've met a lot of cool people along the way which have taught me different things. So basically what I want to do is I want to give you the advice that I have gotten and just pick out whatever you think's useful. So first out, we're going to start with Jesse. Jesse Neve is awesome. He's a lead programmer on projects I worked on at Vanguard Games. And he always had this statement, especially near deadlines, when we had our milestones were coming up and we knew we wanted to cram those last things in and everyone's rushing around, like making the submits and getting it tight and sending stuff off to QA. And he'd always say, like, if you feel the need to hurry, you should probably slow down. And we made a bunch of big cock-ups. After following his advice, often at the end of the sprint we started cutting content on the last day. This polish will not go in, and it saved our lives a million times. So heed his advice. Next up is Ted. We actually used Ted, that's awesome. There's this story for IT help desk at a programming college. And obviously all these programming students would constantly come up to the IT help desk and ask for help because their code wasn't working, wasn't compiling for some kind of reason. And they spent so much time on generic advice that they basically put a teddy bear in front of their desk and they would tell people to first ask the question at TED, and if that didn't help you, then you could come back to the desk and they'd help you. And the funny thing is that this actually works brilliantly, like people walking up to the teddy bear, talking to the teddy bear and going, obviously. Now, if you relate this back to game development, there's this thing called vetting, and I don't think a lot of people here use it. Anyone uses vetting? Vetting submits? None? Okay, that's even less than I expected. So the basic premise is this: you never make a submit on your own. Never. You create your submit, you create your change list in Perforce, SVN, whatever it is you're using. You set everything up nicely, ready to click that submit button. Then you get one of your buddies. And you're talking through the entire set of changes. You walk through all the codes you've changed, all the different values that they've changed. And there's bound to be this one thing that one person is going to ask you, like, oh, but did you remember this hack we used in level 1? Did you change the value there? Or if you do it in this function, we also know this function is used in blah blah whatever. And you catch bugs before they happen. We use this in our Basebusters team at Vanguard Games and it worked brilliantly for us. We never really got other teams on it, but this is really good written for me. So, vetting. Then we get to a real vague one. I'm a real bookworm. I'm a brainiac. I love reading. Anyone read the book? Gödel, Escher and Bach? Cool. That's like non-stereotypical. Awesome. Basically, well, it's an awesome book on formal logic and how intelligence can come into existence. And the one thing that I took from the book, there are many different things to take, but one of the things I took is this answer. If you have a very difficult question, you just go, meh. You unask the question. You turn the world inside out. You think about it backwards. As a designer, you're often trying to solve a problem, but there are often ways to not solve the problem because the problem doesn't exist. As Jack Sparrow said, it's the problem's not the problem, but your attitude towards the problem is the problem. Savvy? Then we go to Joost. Some of you indies might know this guy. I was working at another game design school, and I had this student, and he was full of ideas, and he could write books like no other, game design documents that thick, awesome stuff. And but I didn't think he was very good as a designer, and I had troubles teaching him that lesson. And I talked to Joost about this, and then Joost wrote a blog post on the role of the designer in a team, and he came with this quote: "Game designers who lack skills to actually create things themselves are useless fools." And I wholeheartedly believe in this statement, that if you're a game designer, there is no reason to not go into the tools and make stuff yourself. Doesn't mean you necessarily need to learn how to code or visual scripting. It could also be that you know how to set up assets. But whatever you're able to produce yourself without anyone else's help, you'll be a big addition to the team. Debugging would be a really good place to start. Learn how to debug, help your programmers. The next one is Jan Willem. They were making an early version of what later became Super Cratebox. We called it Bert heeft het moeilijk. We loved that game. It was the original Indigo. We played it to bits. And we were playing this shooting game all the time, and then he came with this statement, which he later repeated in his screen shake presentation. That's the word. Always give a player a reason to not press the button. This makes the mechanic interesting. If you have a mechanic in your game and you're constantly pressing that button, you're constantly shooting, for instance, or you're constantly running, then there's no reason to have the button there. You should take the button out and make him automatically shoot or automatically run. But if there's a reason to not press the button because of recall, or because of limited ammo, or because of other reasons, then you create tension. So this often helps me in my game design predicaments. Next one is a bit of a brainiac thing again. Mathieu Wegerman is a professor at the University of Eindhoven. He's a real engineer. And I love learning. I love learning from books. I read everything to bits, and I had this idea that in my head I could solve all these things, and I got really smart by staying in my head and reading books and philosophizing with my friends. And then I talked to this guy. Well, he helped me on a number of occasions, but he basically says, well, knowledge is actually a function of experience, skills, and attitudes. So that means that if you want to learn something, it's not just about learning the terms, it's not just about learning the vocabulary and the methodology and the theory, but it's also about putting it to an experience and understand it in a tactical sense. It's also about your attitude towards problems or problem solving at large. Which basically create knowledge in your head. So think more broadly than just a little talk of hearing someone speak or reading a book or reading an article. It's about putting it into practice with the right attitude, which actually makes you knowledgeable. Then we've got Chen Twijnstra. Works at Abstraction Games these days, I guess. He did a really good talk on thinking inside the box at what was then called Festival of Games. The basic premise is I don't believe in thinking outside of the box. I think it's bullcrap. I really believe in making your box smaller and smaller and smaller, and setting more and more design constraints for yourself, and then within that limited space finding a gem of a solution. Then once you find that solution, you can start to take design constraints off to let it breathe more. But I've always found that the weirdest solutions I found to problems was not in broad creative thinking, but it was actually in constraining it to an extreme extent, and to that point where I really think there wasn't a solution possible, I would get the most extreme constraints and use those to come to a solution, and then expand from there. So that's really a good advice, I think, that I got from Chen. Then finally, I do want to have one little thing that I add on a personal note, and that is this is why I love creating games. This is why I love making music, and this is why I love dancing. Improvisation to me is the ultimate form of flow. The moment when I'm doing stuff, and while I'm doing it, I'm not even thinking about it anymore, but I just create things. I can do this on a piano, I can do this on the dance floor. I can only do this with video games if I've set up the tools properly. in the audio department, for instance, I've got all these synthesizers set up and Ableton running, and there's all these MIDI channels, and it's all working. Now, if I'm playing music, and anyone who's got their little home studio knows this, at a certain point I want to turn on the extra synthesizer and I start playing on it, but I don't get sound, right? And I need to go into this debug mode. And at that point it just kills my improvisation, it kills my flow. However, if I set it up properly, for instance with game design systems, making values easily trackable or easily changeable, really simple stuff, it can make sure that you get into the flow, and for that 5 or 10 minutes that you get into that zone, you have everything you need and you don't need to go into technical engineering kind mode to get to your next step. So these are 9 different advices that I would want to give to you, that have been given to me, and I hope they're helpful to you. If not, come ask me and tell me why they suck. Thank you very much.
Just to reinforce one of the lessons with a small anecdote, I was up to 4 o'clock last night making a build because we did not vet or submit. Changes were submitted that were not supposed to be submitted. So, yeah, valuable lessons there. Are there any questions for me? I see one in the back, yeah.
What's the worst piece of advice you ever had?
I don't think I need to repeat that one.
Damn it, good question, Alan.
Cheers for putting him on the spot.
So the worst piece was actually by who was once a design director at W Games, and he talked about design in separating into boxes. Right? He would compartmentalize problems to an extreme extent, and then solved all these little boxes. And that was his took in design, was that way of thinking, but you never got coherence that way. So that probably is one that I really try to avoid. Yep.
Is there ever been anything you needed to unlearn?
Is there anything I needed to unlearn?
Habits.
Yes, definitely. As a producer, as other people in the industry as well, I've been on the brink of a burnout, trying to keep control in a process where I didn't have control, trying to control people, tasks, milestones, deadlines. I tried to own all the problems because I thought I was going to solve them that way, and in the end I was running around like a madman trying to solve small little fires while no one was in the deck of the ship making sure we were heading the right course. So unlearning, letting go basically was difficult for me as a producer. Yep, other questions?
How do you feel about letting someone control the project that you feel is like wouldn't be able to control it properly? Like you know that they're not doing the right thing, but they're the lead.
Yeah. Have I ever been in a project where I didn't trust the person in charge to be in charge fully?
Yeah.
Well, have been in such a situation. Basically, throwing it out in the open was the only way for me to help it. I needed to be able to discuss this distrust because it didn't help the other person either in doing their job properly. So in the end, I first sat down with him. Did it really work? Got all defensive, but it took us almost 2 sprints and 2 retrospectives to really get to a point where it was an approachable problem and where I was starting to not be agitated about it, but was able to say what the practical points was where it went wrong. So I think keeping practical problems in mind, because you all want to solve those, and at least being able to discuss it in some way or form, how painful it is. That was the solution I took. Last question?
Not everyone at the same time, please.
Oh, there's over there.
Yes. What's the one singular piece of advice you would give to every starting game designer?
The single piece of advice I would give to any starting game designer.
These 9 weren't enough?
Fail fast. That's the basic one. Make lots of games and try out how that works and how that works for you. the only way to learn how to create games is just do it lots and lots. And come here to these kind of places and discuss it. That's a good one as well. Good, let's have a beer.
Yeah.